Prognosis EHR Practice Management Patient Portal, Portal Overview. Implementing the patient portal in your practice makes it easier for everyone, the patient as well as yourselves. For instance, new patients can self-register using the portal. This allows them to complete all the required demographic information, including emergency contact, employment data, as well as patient insurance. They can complete any new patient paperwork that you require and have it submitted to the practice prior to their initial visit. Existing patients have a secure login which allows them to access test results, their vitals history, health maintenance or vaccination reminders, and patient education. They can securely communicate with medical staff and providers, request prescription refills and appointments. In compliance with meaningful use core objectives, they can access their clinical summary and visit history. And for those who use the practice management system, patients can view and pay their outstanding bills and statement history. The benefits include communication via a secure channel between patients and the clinic staff or providers. Chart prep can be done in advance of the patient's arrival for the applicable visits. And the best part is you control what the patient is able to see and do with their PHI based on settings and configuration, which is covered in a separate video. Now, the portal itself is accessed through a URL or an internet address, same as your Prognosis database is. And any user to Prognosis has this access. If you click your blue info button up here in the system tray, once the portal has been turned on in your practice, down here on the left-hand margin, you will see to copy link, click here. That allows you to copy that link into your computer keyboard, open up another browser to your internet. I happen to be using the Internet Explorer, so I'm going to choose the option New Session, paste that address in, and then that is going to open the patient portal. Now, when it comes to presenting the portal or the URL to your patients, you have a couple of different options. One, if you have a corporate website, or if you use an external site such as Google My Business, you can embed it as an interactive link, a menu option or a graphic image. You can present it to your patients however you would like. Now, to do this, you will need to get the appropriate scripts that open up that URL, either from your implementation manager or through technical support, based on your current status with us. You also can explain to your patients how they can directly access it within the browser, as I just showed you. Now, this would, of course, include typing the URL manually into the address field of the internet browser, or since the patient is going to be auto-generated an email through your EHR when you assign their user ID and password, you can modify the template to include the URL within the body of that email. So while I am logged in here still to Prognosis, we're going to go over how to create the patient's user ID and password. So this is done under their demographics, which is through Patient Register. I'm going to go ahead and open up my patient, Jessica Pearson. And if you notice down here on the lower right, right above Jessica's photograph in our patient-focused icons, the far right icon is for our login info. In Jessica's case, we notice that it is grayed out. That means that she currently does not have access to the portal. Once we give her an ID or password to the portal, this icon will color red to indicate she now has access. If we look over here in the lower left, Jessica does have an email address on file. So your options now when we go into the login info button are 1, auto-generate, which allows the system to just compile a user ID based on the first and last name of the patient, as well as a random password, and it will email it to her as a secure attachment. Or you can create a password yourself and assign it here. Either way, whether it is auto-generated by the system or you manually assign a temporary one, the password is good for only one login. So when the patient receives the password, either through an email or by you verbally telling them, it will immediately expire the first time they use it, and then they will then be able to create their own HIPAA-compliant password. So in this example, we see that her user ID is Jessica P. And I'm just going to go ahead and click auto-generate. And when I do, you will see that the next two password fields gray out. If I decide I don't want to auto-generate it, which of course is your only option when the patient does not have an email, then deselect that option. And now I can type in my password, such as TEMP 1, 2, 3, 4, and then click OK. Now, I happen to use my email address for Jessica since she's a fictional patient. So I'm going to open up my personal email here so you can see what the email looks like. Now, they're going to receive this in their personal email, their Yahoo, their Gmail, their Hotmail, whatever they use at home. And you'll see it's coming in from do-not-reply@mail.prognosis.com. You, of course, can change that under your system configuration settings so that it says do-not-reply@mypractice.com or mydoctor.com so they know who is sending them this email. You will, of course, need to inform your patients to make sure that is not in their spam filters so that they're able to retrieve it. And in this case, you'll see that the subject line says, change password for patient, because this is the temporary password the patient is receiving. Now, when I open up the email, you'll see the body of it is instructing the patient that their login information is provided in the secure PDF attachment. If they do not have Adobe Acrobat Reader on their computer, which is required to read the attachment, there is a link where they can download it for free. The second step tells them that when they click the attachment, it's going to ask for a password. That password is their date of birth and month, day, year format with no slashes. This is not the password to the portal. This is the password that unlocks the document which has the password to the portal. Then the instruction is that they will have to change it after the first login, and the new password should be between 8 and 10 digits long with at least one letter, at least one number. The user ID is not case sensitive, but the password is. So in the case of Jessica, I'm just going to go ahead and click on this PDF, and again, it's going to ask me for a password, which is her date of birth. You do have to enter all 8 digits with no slashes. And now this is going to open up the PDF that says what her portal password is. So now this user ID, Jessica P, and this password, temp1234, is how Jessica will get into the patient portal. And again, this password will immediately expire. So the patient will have to change it the first time it is used. Well, now we're going to take a look at the portal as the patient will see it. I've gone ahead and entered the URL manually into my internet browser, but regardless of how the patient gets to it, this is the splash screen that they will get. And if we look here towards the middle bottom, we have 2 login options. We have a registered patient login or a new patient sign up. That, of course, will be controlled by your local workflow if you want to allow your new patients to self-register or only allow them to access the portal once they have been assigned a user login through your practice. So since Jessica is already a registered patient, I'm just going to go ahead and click Registered Patient Login and put in the user ID and password that was emailed. Now remember, we said that this password is good for one time only and immediately expires. And that's true whether the password is auto-generated or manually assigned by you. So this is the change password screen that immediately comes up. The patient will retype that original password and then assign a new one. And notice that the rules are on the screen here, that the password needs to be between 8 and 10 digits long, have at least one alphabet as well as at least one number. And then a secret question ensures that if the password is lost or forgotten, the system will email a link to reset it. So I'm just going to go ahead and save that. Now that I've reset my password as Jessica, I'm going to go back into Registered Patient Login. But this time I use the password I just assigned myself. The user ID does not change, only the password. And this opens up the default homepage or the landing page of the patient portal as it comes to you. So we're looking at standard default values here in my training environment. As we discuss in our client setup video, you can customize this by hiding details that you don't want your patient to see and modifying their functionality and whether or not it's read-only or if they have the ability of updating the data. So we will discuss all of that in a separate video, but just to give you an overview, loosely, the overall user interface here mimics the encounter screen. For example, across the top, we have the patient band, whereas on your encounter screen, it is specific to the encounter. Here on the portal, it is only patient-level data. So we don't see things like encounter date or encounter type, but we do see the patient's physician, their date of birth, their last visit date, and their chart number. Now this is, of course, customizable if there's additional values you would like to display up there. And then also similar to the encounter screen, we have our table of content menu along the left-hand margin, which allows the patient to change between different views, which data is then displayed on the right. And this now corresponds to the different menu tabs here across the middle top. Now, the default view that we're seeing here is My Health Record. The summary under My Health Record is the face sheet level data that you have inside EHR. Difference being is that this is read-only for the patient. So whether they're looking at their problem list, their allergies, their social history, their medications, this is read-only as to what has already been documented on their face sheet. If you want the patient to interact and be able to modify it, they're going to do that through patient forms, which requires a visit in order to update. But as far as being able to read their chart level data, this is how they can do it. The other choices here along the left, they can see their encounter history. This also provides links to their progress note and their clinical summary based on local preference if you want to give them that access or not. They can view their lab results, radiology results, vitals and lab matrix if you want them to be able to see how their numbers are fluctuating from one visit to another. Patient education, they can directly access links if you've referred them to other websites, or download PDFs that maybe you want them to read as far as the education within their plan of care. And then meaningful use, of course, requires the ambulatory summary be available for the patient to download, print, or share with a third party. Now, moving across those menu tabs, you can give them the ability of requesting appointments, as well as viewing upcoming appointments. Qualifying medications, if they're available for a refill, the patient can request those. Patient forms, whether they're new patient paperwork or existing patient questionnaires, legal documents such as HIPAA policies, risk assessments, things of that nature. The message center, now these are secure messages. The external email the patient has will still get a message that generically states, please log into the portal for a message from your doctor. But the secured PHI piece of the message will only be viewable here under the portal message center. Personal info allows them to update their emergency contact, their demographics, insurance, change their password, as well as assign authorized users. Now within Prognosis, we only give the patient their login. But if they would also like to give other family members ability of viewing their records, they can assign authorized users at this point. And then if you use Practice Management, you will have the Billing Info tab, which allows them to view their outstanding balances, make payments, and view statement history. Far right is also where they can view their health maintenance reminders, if there's upcoming vaccinations or health maintenance testing that is required, so that they know when to contact the office to make those appointments. So again, remember to check out the client setup video to learn how to configure this and make it suit your local preferences. But this is what the patient will see when they log in to the patient portal. I'm just going to go ahead and log out by clicking this red button, and it takes me back to my splash screen. Now, the only difference between the registered patient login and new patient sign up is a new patient sign up does not prompt you for a user ID and password because they have not got a chart number yet in Prognosis. Now, there is a supported event property within EHR that needs to be enabled that sends a message to the appropriate persons within your office that a new patient has signed up. Also, if you want them to automatically create their registration chart under Patient Register as active, you'll need to make sure that is set. But the person can go ahead and register themselves. So I'm just going to go ahead and enter my basic demographics, my name, my date of birth. I've made my address mandatory, as well as my phone number within my database. And most people, if they're going to let the patients do self-registration, will also make this mandatory. It's very important to make sure you get the email address, because the user ID and password is going to be emailed to the new patient just as it was the existing patient. And when it comes to the meaningful use data, you also have the option of making that information mandatory for your patient. And then just go ahead and click submit. Now what it is going to do is send the patient an email with their user ID and password. So at this point now, it is going to be the same as what we already saw with Jessica. The only difference here now, if you'll notice in the email, There's the one that we saw from Jessica when we changed her password or reset it. This is for the new patient sign up. The subject line is saying your login details for the portal. Now this template is similar to what we saw on our existing patient, but if you notice here at the bottom, there is a little additional verbiage about completing the patient forms and contacting the office if they need to make an appointment. So this template, of course, can also be customized as needed for the new patient workflow. So it is also going to be securely attached here as a PDF. They will have to unlock it using their date of birth. And then in this case, it's inpatient for new patient and temp 1234. So now that I've created myself as a new patient in EHR, it's very similar to what we saw with Jessica. So I'm going to log in now as an established patient. Since it's my first login, I'm going to be prompted to change the password. Once I do, however, since this time I am following a new patient workflow instead of an existing patient workflow, instead of immediately getting my landing page, it is immediately asking me to fill out my demographic information, my insurance information, and then intake forms that I have defined. Now, this new patient workflow is based on a property. And what it's designed to do is to have the new patient go ahead and go through all of their registration information, such as their basic details, address, phone number, date of birth, their emergency contact, health insurance information, and then any of the intake forms that you may require for them. It strings these together in an automatic workflow that they can just complete all of the required fields and then do save and next, and it will bring up the next ones. Now, anything that you've not made mandatory, they will be able to skip. But if it's mandatory, they will have to answer it. And then finally, we have the patient forms, which again is covered in the patient form video. So at this point, a new chart has been created within Prognosis. Based on the values of the property that you have defined, it will either be in an active or an inactive status. There's also a user role that you define in order to notify users when a patient has self-registered so that it can then be followed up accordingly. Now, if you did have them go through any intake forms such as medical history, the clinical data cannot actually be updated into the patient's chart until they have an appointment that is marked arrived as an encounter, and we're going to cover that in a separate video. So in review, patients can access the portal in several different ways. First of all, the user ID and password are created within EHR from the patient register, and it can be either auto-generated or manually assigned, verbally told to the patient, or emailed to the patient. The URL that opens the portal then can be accessed directly through an internet browser or via an embedded link or a menu option from a corporate website. New patients can be allowed to self-register, which would include their demographic as well as clinical details based on local workflow. All existing patients can then easily access their protected health information, such as their visit history, lab and radiology test results, patient education, meaningful use clinical summary, reminders of upcoming services due, any secure messages from the doctor or medical staff, and if you use practice management, the patient can also view their outstanding bills, statements, as well as make e-payments. Now, there's some interactive features based on local workflow that can allow patients to request appointments, request refills for qualifying medications, as well as update demographics and insurance information, and complete required paperwork. Benefits workflow-wise then allow you to do chart prep in advance of a patient's visit, as well as have bidirectional, direct, and secure electronic communication between the patients and the practice.